Paul, give us your sense. You mentioned the fact that there are some perceptions out there, at least among a group of voters, that the economy is still very lousy, despite the recent data that we've gotten showing that it has remained remarkably resilient. As we head into 2024, for investors out there, I guess, how do you see what we're currently seeing in terms of the stability of the economy playing out here going forward, and whether or not you think it's time for the Fed to cut rates?
Oh, it's definitely time for the Fed to cut rates. I like to compare the economic numbers look a lot like they did in late 2019 right now. The unemployment rate is about the same. The underlying inflation is just slightly higher, but very close to the Fed's 2% target now. The Fed's forecast of inflation for the next year is just slightly higher than it was, but the Fed funds rate was 1.75 in late 2019. And it's 5.5 now. It's very hard to justify, given that inflation has collapsed. The war on inflation suddenly is over. We won. And it's very hard to understand why rates should stay where they are now, given that the inflation that was supposed to be the big justification for rate hikes seems to be, just gone away. And is there, could there be a recession in 2024? Who knows? I mean, there's very little. There's some very, very slight hints of weakness in the data, but economists have a perfect track record on predicting recessions, which is we've never been right. So I don't think that's something we can go on. But the inflation is definitely basically a solved problem.
Yeah, economists have been calling for a recession for the better part of, a year and a half at this point, right, Paul? So at the end of the day.
Decades of experience. The economists have never successfully called a recession. And when there's unanimity that one is coming, it doesn't happen.
What is the largest shift in tone that you're anticipating from the Fed with that regard?
Oh, I think it's a big deal when the Fed basically says we're cutting rates because inflation appears to be largely under control. And they'll probably be much more cautious in the way they say it. But even so, I think it makes a big difference to a lot of people out there. It's one thing to have all of us sitting here with our, with our data and even to have news reports that say that measures of underlying inflation are now close to the Fed's target. It's a very different thing to have the Fed actually acting on that. That's a kind of a validation. We know it's true, but it'll be a very big deal the first time that the Fed says, well, given the progress on inflation, we're cutting rates.